All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Reform California briefing on our efforts to restore election integrity in our state. We really are taking this issue on a number of fronts because we know that it really requires immediate action, but also a long-term fix. Our efforts can be reviewed, and you can keep up to date on the website electionintegrityinitiative.com. Electionintegrityinitiative.com. That is the campaign website, dedicated portion of our Reform California site just on the issue of restoring election integrity in California. So as you want to keep up to speed on developments, news, if you want people to sign up to help us collect signatures on the voter ID initiative we're going to talk about in a moment, if you want to contribute, do so on that website and share that website, electionintegrityinitiative.com. With that, if you have any questions, let me tell you how you can submit those. In the Zoom app, you can type your question into the Q&A box, and I will read those at the end of the presentation and cover those. If you would like to speak on Zoom, you can raise your hand in the software and we'll call on you to ask your question. When we call on you, please unmute yourself. If you're on the phone and want to ask a question, you can hit *9 at the end of the briefing, and you'll hear a tone when you've been called on, and you can state your question. And finally, if we don't get to your question or if you think of something afterwards, please email us at info@reformcalifornia.org. So let's start out. We know that there are major problems with California elections, and the liberal media in this state refuse to admit it. They refuse to cover the documented failures to impose basic internal controls on the way in which our elections are conducted. As a result, we know that the weak practices that have been imposed on us by Sacramento Democrats, by the politicians, those weak practices open the door to all sorts of voter fraud. And just having the practices the way we do, the way in which we conduct our elections, it undermines trust and confidence in the process. And so when the media says this is all about conspiracy theories or election denials, no, these are documented problems that deserve common sense solutions. And in fact, when we actually raise the problems that I'm about to walk through, the media, the liberal media, and the Democrat politicians in California, they have no response because they can't argue with the points that we're making. There's no way to defend these practices. So instead, what they do is say that there's no problem at all. It's election denialism. It's conspiracy theories, because they know that they cannot respond to the criticisms about the weak approach to elections that we allow in California. Here's some of the documented issues. Number one, we do not verify the eligibility of the voters on the voter rolls. The California Secretary of State has issued regulations that are absolutely laughable, absolutely ineffective. And the Secretary of State is a Democrat political appointee. It's not appointee, it's a politician. Shirley Weber, our current Secretary of State, has zero interest, zero motivation for changing these weak practices. These practices were brought in by Democrat politicians like herself. And so the California Secretary of State has immense power to weaken the voter verification, the review of eligibility for people who submit voter registrations. The motor voter law also creates a problem for verification. And basically, we have people going to the DMV, and I even experienced this myself. I know a lot of our supporters have reported these issues. And you go to just renew your license, and it takes you to a screen that says, would you like to register to vote? Well, I want to register to vote. I want to remain registered. But what people don't realize is that by clicking yes, you're re-registering. And of course, it can change your party registration, a default to no party preference. In very small print on the screen, it will say that If you're not a U.S. citizen, you shouldn't proceed forward. And again, most people are not even seeing that. Most people just fill out paperwork. We also know that under California welfare rules, which allow for illegal immigrants to receive welfare, that caseworkers are told that they are to give voter registration cards to anyone who receives public assistance. It's part of California regulation and law. And so we have illegal immigrants that are getting packets and being told, fill out this paperwork. And included in that packet is a voter registration form. So there are all sorts of problems with how motor voter and other laws are inviting people to register in a very confusing way, in a way that doesn't have internal controls. And then the Secretary of State fails to do proper eligibility checks. Second, that has resulted in outdated voter registration lists. Those same regulations that don't check new registrations don't go back and review the activity and the continued eligibility of existing registrations. We know that between 2019 and 2022, more than 2 million people fled California because they can't afford to live here anymore. They can't stomach living here. It wasn't just the 500,000 you read in the media, because that was net migration. And we had, 1.5 million illegal immigrants come in. So that offset 2 million that left, and the result was 500,000 net migration. But 2 million people fled California between 2019 and 2022. And of course, we've even seen people who fled California back in 2016, 2014, 2012, who haven't lived in California for more than a decade, and they're still on the list of registered voters. This is appalling. It is absolutely indefensible. And the California Secretary of State has tied the hands of county registrar voters in cleaning up their lists. Judicial Watch filed a lawsuit in Los Angeles on this very issue when they identified that there were more people registered to vote on the voter rolls in LA than there were actually people in LA. That's because we're not maintaining properly our lists. Third, the Democrats knew this. They created this problem of an outdated voter roll. And then they said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take that outdated voter roll and we're going to mail everybody a ballot. And so it creates what we call millions of orphan ballots. 1 out of 10 was about 9.7% of California households in the last election got an erroneous ballot mailed to their home. And an erroneous ballot would be someone received a ballot at their home who's dead or moved away, or they don't even know who this person is. And those are called orphan ballots because there's a ballot, there's a legal vote floating around out there. There's the instrument. It's not a legal vote. It's an instrument of voting that's floating out there. We would never just let, 1,000 ballots sit in the middle of a park during an election. People would say, well, that's outrageous. You can't do that. Someone could walk in there and take those ballots. But we're putting out 1 million plus ballots in California. And those are orphan ballots. It's no different than putting a box of ballots in the middle of a park. And again, the media refuses to understand this or even report it and acknowledge it. It also, by doing an all mail-in election with ballots and not requiring that someone proactively ask for the ballot, it eliminates chain of custody because you have all these orphan ballots out there. You don't know who has intercepted them, who has received them. Oh, but there's more problems. Let's continue. Next slide. There are ballot harvesting schemes. So, and this is all part of this perfect storm that the Democrats have created. They create voter lists that are absolutely out of date. Then they mail out ballots to everybody. Then they legalize ballot harvesting. I mean, it sounds like they got a comprehensive plan here. Get a lot of orphan ballots out there, and then like a Hoover vacuum machine, come out and harvest those ballots and pay people to go and help people turn out. And by the way, a lot of those get out the vote operations that the left-wing groups are conducting are paid for by your tax dollars. Taxpayer money is going to groups like Alliance San Diego, the Chicano Federation, Environmental Defense, the Environmental, whatever it is, the Environmental Defense Advocates. They're going out there collecting ballots through ballot harvesting in a way that no other state allows this, by the way, because all those other states know that this is an absolute fraud-prone approach to voting. So we have ballot harvesting. Then we have a failure to check signatures. The California Secretary of State recently updated the regulations on the protocols for reviewing signatures on ballots, eliminating the sort of due diligence that's required. And so now it's almost impossible to reject a signature. Although in a moment, I'll tell you about a program that we invested in last year that allowed us to get trustworthy workers inside election offices across the state. And they really did a great job of identifying signatures that did not match and pushing hard against the Secretary of State's regulations, pushing hard to have those signatures double checked and rejected. And this is the way the process should work, is if a signature does not match, it should be rejected. And it still gives the voter the opportunity to cure that signature. That's how the process works. Not under the California Secretary of State. She is basically a promoter of fraud. She doesn't care about verifying signatures. Take a look at the regulations. It's quite clear that there's an intent there. And then finally, you will hear some of these politicians say, well, will we do a risk limiting audit? Well, I'm glad that they're doing those, but those risk limiting audits only address a handful of concerns. We believe that we should be showing as much transparency and accountability as possible to the voters to restore their trust and confidence. And that's why we believe a proper post-election audit should be done county by county that would examine the issues above, and that it should be done with an independent board that has an independent voter representative, a Democrat voter representative, and a Republican voter representative to oversee the audit. So these are the problems. Let's talk about ways that we can invest in the solutions. In order to look at solutions, we have to look at where the voters are. And fortunately, despite the misleading information, the lies really by Democrat politicians and the liberal media, voters do have concerns about how our elections are being conducted. And you cannot have a healthy democracy. And this is so important for us to understand. This is not about the 2020 election. It's not about the 2016 election. Because in 2016, you had Democrats saying the election was stolen. In 2020, you had Republicans saying the election was stolen. When you have any ability for that to happen, it means that your election protocols are weak. You cannot have a healthy democracy when, depending upon who wins, a third of the voters think that it was stolen. You cannot have a healthy democracy. And for all the BS we hear from Democrats in the media about the strength of our democracy, we must, defend democracy. How can you say you're defending democracy when a third of the American people don't have trust and confidence in the elections? That's a cancer growing on democracy. Do something about it. In California, the UC Berkeley poll in November of 2022, so this is most recent, they asked this question: do you think that this is a major threat, minor threat, or not a threat at all of, quote, people voting or casting ballots illegally in elections? 39% of Californians think it's a major threat that people could cast votes illegally in elections in our state. But when you consider the minor threat, you mean people who actually acknowledge, yeah, this is a problem. It's a small or minor problem, but it's a problem. You're looking at 60%. 60%. But from all the garbage crap you get from the liberal media, you would never understand that there's actually a supermajority in California that believes that there's a minor to major threat of election fraud. Now, when you look at the party registrations, we see that 1 out of 4 Democrats think it's a major threat. Well, that's pretty substantial, don't you think? 45% of Democrats think it's a minor or major threat. Almost half. It's actually a plurality. 69% of Republicans thinking is a major threat. When you do minor and major, you're up to 90%. You cannot have a healthy democracy when one of the two opposing political parties, where most of their members believe that there's the threat of election fraud. You just can't. That's not a fair democracy. You have to do something about that. As a Democrat, you have to do something about that. And then independents as well. 59% of independents consider it a minor or major threat. Not a threat? Okay, 35%. But when you look there, you still only have half Democrats not giving a rat's rear end about it, and less than a third, or about a third, of independents. Next poll I want to share with you. In the issue of Californians, same poll asked, do you think it's a major or minor threat or not a threat at all, about organized efforts making it harder for Americans to vote in elections? And here's important information for us to really ponder and be respectful about and to understand. And that is, we cannot reform elections in a manner that limits accessibility or makes it harder, because the American people don't want it to be harder. Californians don't want it to be harder. Major threat, 63%. So there's a pretty substantial concern about an effort to make things harder for people to vote. And that's, of course, 80%, 79% of Democrats. But a third of Republicans and almost 2/3 of independents believe that it's a major threat, that some people out there would want to make things harder to vote. A minor threat, 15%, not a threat, 17%. Let's talk about voter ID, because voter ID is being called racist by the Democrats and the liberal media. But when you take a look at poll after poll, there's widespread bipartisan support for voter ID. The Rasmussen poll in March of 2021 showed that support is actually increasing from 2018. 67% of voters said that we should have a voter ID requirement like a driver's license. And we looked at the crosstabs, and we have 50% plus support for voter ID amongst African Americans and Latinos. So this is a clear bipartisan consensus. 89% of Republicans want voter ID, 60% of Democrats, 77% of independents. So when people say, oh, voter ID is a fringe idea, no, you're lying. It's actually the desire of a supermajority of our community, including Democrats and Latinos and African Americans. And the question becomes, why do politicians not want voter ID? So I wanted to share that because it's very important that in whatever reforms we pursue, that we ground them in the public support, where public support is currently. And I do believe that public support will grow as we continue to shine a light on the weaknesses of California elections, which is part of the election integrity strategy that we have. Next slide. Okay. So some of the issues that we're looking at and we have to balance, number one is, how do we fix the problem? And so I want to prioritize reforms that will have the biggest impact on fixing the problem of election fraud. And that might mean that there are some issues that we are concerned about, but in the grand scheme of things, if we don't get these top three, it doesn't matter if we do that. We have to get these top three done first, and we can always come back and do additional. Second, you need to understand that elections are not just governed by state law. They're also governed by federal law. And we have to comply with the Help Americans Vote Act, the National Voter Registration Act, because those impose statutory requirements on what we can and cannot do. And it's frustrating because it empowers politicians like Shirley Weber as Secretary of State to do really bad things. It protects her right to make those decisions. And so we have to figure out how to accommodate the federal law and still get the reform implemented. As I mentioned, we have to look to the public support and where it is, can't move beyond where it is. And then fourth, if I could wave a magic wand, our reforms would be law tomorrow, clearly. But we don't have a magic wand. We have to fight tooth and nail to get an initiative on the ballot. We have to fight tooth and nail to get it passed. We have to fight tooth and nail to get the county election ordinances that we're going to propose in a moment implemented. A lot of Republicans don't want to do this because they're too afraid of being attacked by the liberal media. And so this is hard stuff, and we need everybody to help us. And let me also say that there are some groups out there who don't have a plan. They may have good intentions, but they can't find their rear end with a search party and a map. And so it's hard because you have people pulling and pushing in different directions for different reasons. We got to come together and see if we can get a few of these reforms implemented as soon as possible. So we are looking at a ballot measure that would be a state constitutional amendment. It would amend the California state constitution, which means the politicians would not be able to pass a law to get around it. First, it would require that California state and local officials would be accountable to maintain accurate voter lists. And this would increase the standard and eligibility for legal challenge when a county registrar or voter does not maintain accurate voter registration lists. Now, remember, the Secretary of State under Help America Vote Act and National Voter Registration Act has certain federal authorities. However, that doesn't mean that the state can't add additional requirements and authorities, provided that it is harmonious with those laws. So we're working on that right now because we know that the Democrats would love to try to do a legal challenge and stop our initiative. So we have to make sure that we harmonize the voter list maintenance requirements that we put in our initiative with federal law. Second, it requires voter ID. It requires for in-person voting, a driver's license or other government ID shall be provided. For vote by mail, it requires a driver's license and a signature match on ballot. Our initiative would overturn the regulations issued by the Secretary of State that allows for signatures that literally look nothing like the person's signature. We would actually have due diligence and real signature reviews under this initiative, and that we know cannot be challenged. Well, what if someone doesn't have a driver's license? We also provide for a voter to verify their identity up to 30 days after the election, thereabouts. It's like 2 days before the certification of results. So there is a grace period that we provide any voter because we do not want to discourage or make it harder to vote. We just want to make sure that you are who you are. And so we do put in place a grace period for verification, which is very similar to what we're doing right now with signature matches and the curing process. Third, we believe that the Democrats are trying to suppress the vote. And we see it happening in county after county when they've eliminating polling stations in favor of polling centers. Now, let me just tell you, if I could wave a magic wand, we'd all be voting on election day. That's what my preference is. But we have to, again, make sure that we have an initiative that does not make it harder to vote. And that's our goal. So we want to make sure that we get to that issue of suppressing the vote. And we would require that every county has to report at the end of the election on wait times in each county for polling locations on election day, and would then have to remediate any problems that they identify for the future election, the very next election, by expanding polling options. So it is important that people understand that we want to make it as easy as possible to vote. We are actually considering expanding on a Democrat bill that sets up polling centers that are open farther out of the election and simply mandating that we do that 30 days out of the election. Hey, I want to make sure that anyone who wants to physically walk in and vote the old-fashioned way, that they can do that. And I want to make it so that there's no excuse not to vote. But we want to make sure that we make it accountable and transparent on polling wait times, because in this last election in Arizona, we know that this was a problem when those machines broke. We do know that you suppress the vote when the Democrats limit the polling stations for conservatives. Next slide. Now, there are some other issues that we are considering, but are not in the initiative at this present time. We are not proposing to ban all mail-in ballot elections. And I know that there's frustration here, but think about it this way. If we properly validate the signature and have a voter ID component to the mail-in ballots, I think we may have fixed most of the problem. Banning ballot harvesting, again, this is where I fear Democrats will do a TV ad where they have a lady in a nursing home who wants to vote and her family's dead, and she wants to let her nurse harvest her ballot. And why are you suppressing my vote? So the ballot harvesting is one of these things where, again, we know that there's bad behavior going on here, but if we do get those signature matches, we may fix the problem. Again, if I had a magic wand, I'd ban ballot harvesting. But if a ballot cannot be counted unless you verify the signature and the harvester has to get the person's driver's license number, it's kind of hard for it to be an illegal vote at that point. It's probably a legit vote. So again, I would prefer to ban the ballot harvesting, but I don't want to make this initiative in any way, shape, or form harder to vote. We want to make it easier to vote. And then ending motor voter, the same thing, which is they're going to claim that people like the convenience of getting a driver's license and automatically being registered to vote. I believe that if we do the voter list maintenance provisions of our initiative, that we can address a lot of the weaknesses created by motor voter. Another one is from my good friend, Assemblymember Billy Asaley. He has a great idea of making Election Day a state holiday. We don't do that in our bill. It's certainly not something that we can't do, but since Democrats are already saying they want to do that, let's let them carry that one forward if they want to. So there are some things that are not in the initiative, and I do not expect us to be able to put in the initiative at this time. Now, that's the constitutional amendment. That's statewide. We have to understand that elections in California, while governed by state and federal law, are actually managed on the ground by each individual county. And each county has a registrar of voters. And each registrar of voters is hired by the Board of Supervisors. And Republicans control a lot of county boards of supervisors. You know where I'm headed here, right? I believe that we've got to take the fight to the ground and go county by county and ask each county to introduce and vote on an audit the vote ordinance. This would require, number one, that voter rolls be audited at least 90 days prior to the election, and a public report be issued showing the error rates in the voter registrations. Because we want the public and the media to know, hey, we're about to conduct an election, and it's an outdated voter roll that we're using. Second, we believe that there should be an audit of vote by mail ballot signatures. And this is where we would random sample all ballots that were accepted by mail in the election. And we would look randomly at a sample of signatures, and we would put them up on the screen, and we would compare the signature of the voter on file to the signature that the county registrar accepted in this election. And I want to know what percentage of signatures is deemed by this bipartisan commission, because we would set up a committee of one Democrat, one Republican, one independent, don't match. And if it comes back that, well, we know it didn't match, but the Secretary of State told us we had to count this one, well, then that's on Shirley Weber. We get to expose the fact that she is a dishonest politician promoting dishonest elections. It's got to be transparent. We've got to do these audits so that it's absolutely crystal clear what's going on. And then I want to do 100% review of ballots that were rejected. And this is where the signature was flagged by the registrar as not matching. And then they reject the ballot and they sent out cards and mailers and calls to the voter saying, hey, your signature doesn't match, but you have time to cure it. come and send back a postcard, let us know. Well, we actually have lists of rejected ballots in a number of counties, and we're actually auditing those lists right now of rejected ballots where the voter got rejected and they never bothered to cure the ballot, which tells me that voter probably doesn't exist. That voter did not submit that ballot, and that means who in the hell did submit the ballot? If we do the audit the vote approach, then we don't have to take that burden on. Each county would be able to do that themselves. And then third, there's no reason why a county can't audit its wait times at polling stations. With or without our constitutional amendment, they can do that right now. So the audit the vote ordinances are things that we want to introduce and push to get passed in the next 18 months in time for 2024. Next slide. So how do we get some of this stuff done? First, we do have to acknowledge that the 2024 election will be conducted under the loosey-goosey system currently in place. Because even if we got our initiative qualified for the ballot in 2024, it would not appear until November of 2024. It would not take effect until December of 2024 for future elections. So we've got to be ready to get on the ground and fight. The Transparency Foundation, a 501c3, has a program trying to educate all voters, not just Republicans, independents, Democrats, all voters on how to vote safe. It's called the Secure the Vote Initiative California. They did a version of this in 2022. It worked real well. The safe voting method stands for send, audit, fix, examine. And there's step-by-step how to vote. We urge people to vote early. Do not wait till election day. Vote early. Vote by mail in the first 72 hours, but thereafter vote in person. But it allows them to audit their vote to verify the ballot was actually accepted, received and accepted. If they don't have their ballot verified, then they have 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 week left to go get a provisional ballot and ensure that their ballot is counted by going in person. It also includes Safe Vote Sunday events, the first Sunday of the month. So the very first Sunday that people have their ballots, there would be an early vote effort. We find that the partnership with churches is a great way because it's a Sunday, Safe Vote Sunday. We talked about the early voting already. And then, of course, recruiting trusted workers to take paid jobs in county election offices. Now, there are some groups out there saying, become an election monitor. If you've never done election monitoring, you're in for quite a rude awakening because you get put in the corner 50 feet away from where the actual ballots are being opened, and it's almost irrelevant. It actually is irrelevant. Now, if you have nothing more to do with your time, please help us with that because we do need people there to monitor what's going on because there are some things that can happen when there's no monitor in the room. But I'd rather have someone with integrity take a job in the election office and actually open the envelopes. I want them to do the signature reviews. The left has infiltrated these offices. They have a very exquisite, very extensive plan. We don't have to wait to get a voter ID initiative qualified and passed to get this program statewide. And so where this was implemented by the Transparency Foundation last cycle, we saw a major spike in ballots rejected because signatures did not match, which is a good thing. And then, of course, the curing process thereafter. That needs to happen again in 2024, and we're going to support them at that effort. What do we need to do to advance the ballot measure and advance the county by county ordinances that I just described? Number one, we need volunteers ASAP. We need to recruit volunteers in each region of the state to collect signatures. And we're not going to start signature collection until we know we have enough signature volunteers. I do not want to waste the time of our volunteers by doing a symbolic effort. We need to get our volunteer base built out. And so voteridpetition.org is the site you can sign up on, or go to the website I gave you at the beginning of the presentation, and I will also give you at the end, where you can sign up as a petition gatherer. Second, we need to raise money. I can guarantee you that we will not get any money from the politicians, Republican or Democrat. We won't get any money from the party. We won't get any money from business groups because they think this is a distraction. I think this is one of the most important things that we can and need to do, but we still need to raise about $3 million to cover hard costs to qualify the initiative. And of course, I believe that this passes just by getting it on the initiative. Obviously, Democrats are going to smear it. They're going to give us a bad title. But we know that people want a voter ID. And so I actually do believe that voters will find their way to us. It's not going to be easy. Don't get me wrong. But I believe by putting this on the ballot, it does nothing but help our side. But we do need the financial resources to cover hard costs. And then finally, third, integration. Part of winning in this election would be to get every local and state candidate to actually run on our initiatives. We already have the California Taxpayer Protection Initiative qualified for a vote in 2024. So we're going to be able to go to the voters and say, hey, it costs too much to live in California. Your utility bills are skyrocketing because of hidden state taxes. Vote yes on the California Taxpayer Protection Initiative. Here's the ballot number. Well, why not say also, and we need to make sure we end the debate about whether we have good or bad elections. Let's just get a voter ID requirement and call it a day. Our candidates have to get the word out by making the Taxpayer Protection Initiative and the Voter ID Initiative a centerpiece in their communications in November 2024. So what do we do next? And please get your questions ready. Sign up at electionintegrityinitiative.com. That's the website. We will continue to post news to that site. But more importantly, that's how you can sign up to be a volunteer to collect signatures. You can share the page with your friends, invite people to upcoming town halls, and then you can contribute. We've got 5 town halls already scheduled in Southern California. We're going to be adding others coming up. Another online town hall for people who may not be near some of the physical town halls that we're doing. So this summer, we're taking the show on the road. And the goal is to file the initiative by August and then hit the ground running in the fall with signature collection, qualify it by mid-April 2024 to be in time for the November ballot. So we have a lot of things to do between now and then. To volunteer, we're asking people to either commit to collecting signatures on their own, and we ask you, how many do you think you can collect? Or become an area leader. Sorry, a team leader first. A team leader gets 4 friends and you, so a total of 5 volunteers together, and you all just agree that you're going to over email and text message, talk to each other about where you're going to collect signatures and how many, and kind of like a group, a little bit of peer pressure, kind of help each other keep disciplined and focused on collecting signatures. So a team leader says, I will recruit 4 of my friends for a total of 5 of us to collect signatures. An area leader would support teams in a specific area. So for example, you might have an area leader in La Mesa, California, or an area leader in North Huntington Beach. And the area leader would literally have maybe 5 to 10 teams underneath them, and they just check in and help serve as a point of reference in addition to collecting their own signatures. A regional leader might be coastal Orange County, North Orange County, South Orange County, one of those areas, South Riverside. And your job then would be to work with each of the area leaders underneath you and the teams to help them, to coach them, to do maybe Zoom meetings. Because if we can build out this grassroots structure, this can be done without the support of the Republican Party, without the support of business groups. That's the only way this is going to happen. And so we urge you, sign up and let us know what role you legitimately think you can play on that website, electionintegrityinitiative.com. All right. I would like to get your feedback and answer your questions. So let's switch to that now. If you want to ask a question, please type it into the Q&A box. You can also hit raise hand in the Zoom software system. And of course, *9 on your phone. Okay, starting out on the box. And Jordan, let me know when you have someone who you'll bring live. Why can't this get approved before the 2024 election? The answer is it requires that we get the signatures first, and then the only time a citizens initiative can be put on the ballot is in the November general election for each cycle. So the earliest we can get it on is 2024. Susan asks, will California clean up voter rolls? I know my brother-in-law just received a green card holder, who is a green card holder, received several ballots in the past 2 elections. Susan, please let us know about your brother-in-law. He didn't do anything wrong. But please give us his name, email us his name and the information so we can flag that as an example in our media outreach. The reason why they're not cleaning up ballot voter rolls is that this is all done by design. The media knows it. They're laughing about it. They know that when Republicans get discouraged about voting, it means less Republicans vote. And the media, the journalists love that because they're all closet liberals. They're not even closet liberals anymore. They're unabashedly liberal.
Okay,
but
I'm going to
giving us that example, Susan, would be great. All right, we have someone on Zoom.
Yeah, Mary Lou Arman, go ahead and unmute yourself, Mary Lou.
Mary Lou Arman. Go ahead, Mary Lou.
Hi, I'm Mary Lou Amon, and thank you for all you do. Very quickly, one of my concerns is, there are 2 concerns. One is making sure that because of the gas tax debacle, that this ballot measure is worded correctly, because I know that sometimes they can twist that around and people don't really know what they're voting for. Second of all, I don't know whether this has happened, but Governor Newsom is wanting to give driver's license to illegals. And I think that that could also get into more, well, what do I want to say? Voting that is not accurate or legal.
In questions. Number 1, I wish I could give you a better answer on number 1, but let me just tell you where we are. We are going to get the worst ballot title from the Democrats that you can possibly imagine. Okay, that's just the corruption of our state politicians. Under California law, the Attorney General gets to call these ballot measures whatever he wants. Now, we do have an opportunity to sue, and we will look at that opportunity, but it is a long shot. We are looking at a lawsuit against the ballot title for the California Taxpayer Protection Initiative because they've done the same thing to us there. The reality, though, is we've had bad ballot titles in the past and prevailed. Even on the gas tax, we started out with only 22% support on that title because we knew that 75% of people wanted to repeal the gas tax. But when they saw the title, they're like, oh, I don't want that. I don't know what that is. 22% support. We moved that all the way up and almost won. In Prop 15, we had a bad ballot title. They didn't say it was a tax increase. They said it was school improvement initiative. And yet we won that one by 2 percentage points. So look, this is not going to be a fair fight. This is not going to be a fair fight. That is just the crap sandwich that these Democrats always serve up to us. But we have won in the past. It just means that we're going to have to work hard. And the media certainly won't help. But I do think something like the voter ID initiative, it's going to get so many people talking about it. It's going to be so controversial. The Democrats are going to light their hair on fire saying it's racism and voter suppression. The more they talk, the more people will know, hey, voter ID is on the ballot this year. I better go look for that. So we have to be ready for that. And on the second issue, the reality is that we are going to be constrained on our resources. But I've always said that by working together and getting people to collaborate on this stuff, we can connect dots. So the motor voter bill is registering everybody to vote who gets a driver's license, and illegal immigrants now get driver's licenses. There are ways for us to do 2 things. One is in our enabling legislation, require that those checks be done on the accurate voter rolls. But second of all, there are ways for us to get our hands on data from these agencies and do these comparisons ourselves. So I think partly what we have to do is get the evidence so that we can file a lawsuit and show that California is not complying with Help America Vote Act. That's what the Judicial Watch lawsuit did. And that's why it was so remarkable in LA, is that they did their homework.
Okay, next I have Dennis Maddock. Dennis, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Dennis, go ahead.
Hello, my name's Dennis Maddock. How are you? Thanks for doing this. I'm kind of, I guess, guy in charge for the Ventura County chapter of the California Republican Assembly. So we're working hard and have worked with California, voter integrity or Project California. I guess it's also connected with Arizona. We've had a lawsuit here and there, but I agree with you. Not much has really gotten done. And what Judicial Watch did was huge, and I have a copy of that whole thing. So I'm all for this. So with that being said, are you, how many people approximately are on this call, just to gauge what the interest is?
So let me just talk about the voter, the outfit that Ruth Weiss and Linda Payne are doing. I think that they're well-intentioned. I think that they've given out some bad advice. I don't think that they have the bandwidth to manage the challenge. I know Judicial Watch had to do the legal work in order for that LA lawsuit to prevail. And so, hopefully they will pitch in and help collect signatures if they're really serious about voter integrity. I'd like to see them collect signatures, and they should be urged to collect signatures. But I think that if Republicans are going to get, or conservatives or Californians, because there's more than just Republicans concerned about this, if we're going to get the integrity that we deserve in elections, it's going to take an aggressive effort. And this is the aggressive effort that I think we all need to pursue. And everybody's invited to participate. I mean, but it requires that we have a focused plan, an actual legally defensible, well-resourced plan, not emails that are sent out and, an occasional Zoom meeting. Kathleen says, I know 3 people in the last election who received more than 1 ballot at their house. Yep. There's no process to report it. Can we have a clear process to report and reconcile this? There is a website that we support, problemballots.org, where you can actually report your erroneous ballot that you've received. But I think, again, what we've been able to do is identify through that survey process about 9 to 10% of homes are getting erroneous ballots. You will find that when you contact the registrar's office, they will tell you, thanks, just throw it away, just destroy it, because they also know that the Secretary of State's not allowing them to clean their voter rolls. Next question. Anyone from Jordan?
Yeah, there was one. Let me get back to it. Susan A. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey, Susan, go ahead.
Hey, yeah, I just had asked you about, and I told you about my brother-in-law, and I did report that twice, and I did send them a copy. Nothing got done. So, I mean, he still got one the next election. And I asked him, and he was at our house for a short period of time. So he gives this address, and he never registered. So they're sending out ballots to people that get driver's license here.
They are, and I will say this, that I think there are a lot of people who inadvertently get registered, maybe by their own hand, but it's also quite possible that they were automatically. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. I deal in fact. And so until I can prove something, we don't say, oh, this is what we believe it is. But the entirety of their system is designed to make it so that we do not have an accurate voter list. This is by design. And again, I challenge the media, and I do this in press events, and they just, they know what they're doing. They snicker, they smile. They do not want to report on these weaknesses. And just us getting this on the ballot forces this conversation. It embarrasses them. It shows that they have been absolutely fraudulent in their coverage. So there are so many benefits to actually taking the initiative approach. There's also benefits in going county by county because it picks the fight. It forces them to respond to, well, hold on a second. All we're asking is for an audit of our voter rolls. Well, you're not allowed to take people off. Oh, really? Tell us more about how we're not allowed to take people off. That's very intriguing. Are you going to put that in your story? What they'll say is, well, why is the county doing an audit? You're not allowed to take people off the rolls. Great, that's the problem. So you're now admitting that we have people in the rolls that we can't take off, and now you're going to use that same list to go mail ballots to. So again, Republicans need to actually start getting more aggressive on this and smarter about it and more focused. And I think that this is the approach that we have to take. Lori asks, is there an example of another state that enacted effective voter ID laws without lawsuits? Yes. About 22 states have voter ID laws. Everyone thinks that a voter ID law is against the law. It's not. The U.S. Supreme Court, federal district courts have all upheld this requirement. The only people that want you to think this is against the law are Democrats and journalists. So we've got to understand that voter ID, there's nothing wrong with voter ID. In fact, it is actually embraced by the U.S. Supreme Court. Any other digital questions?
We've got one more, Carl. Let me raise hand for the phone number 707.
All right, for the phone number in the 707 area code, 707-481-7514. Go ahead.
Hi there, this is, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. This is Debbie from Sonoma County, north of San Francisco. Here in Sonoma County, we have found that when you vote in person, and you sign your signature, those signatures are not verified at all. Our vote by mail signatures are, but not in person. Is that throughout the whole state, and what is being done about that?
That is correct. That is correct. You simply sign, they hand you your ballot. In the old days, people said, well, who would bother to show up and give a name? You'd be surprised now that all the voter lists are on cell phones of Democrat operatives. They can literally give out tacos and burritos to homeless people and say, here's the person you are, go in. But they don't need to do that because they basically are able to harvest ballots these days. So under our bill, we would basically provide the voter ID. When someone has the voter ID, they walk in, they show it, it's examined by the polling volunteer, the poll worker, and then they're given their ballot. No need to put down the voter ID on the piece of paper. Show, verify, you get your ballot. But by vote by mail, our requirement is that they would have to put the digits for their voter ID, for their driver's license voter ID, and then their signature would be scrutinized and matched because you don't have a physical verification with the ID in front of you. So that's why you have to do the signature in addition to the ID. All right, so I'm asking all of you, please go on the website that we gave you and please sign up. If you want to go to reformcalifornia.org, click under campaigns and voter ID campaign will come up there. Volunteer, contribute, share the page. We've got to get this information out. We've got to get this network built. We will be continuing our discussions with our legal team because we are tightening up the language as much as possible. And then we will be filing by August. We will then get a title and summary, which will be terrible. I know it's going to be terrible. These people are liars, cheats, and thieves. They're never fair. But then by October 15th, we have to have the go, no go decision there. Also want to make sure that those county by county efforts are made, which is why when you sign up, we may need you to go to a county board meeting to help push the case forward. Thank you very much for joining us. And if any other questions are there, please email us at info@reformcalifornia.org.